The air crackled, thick with a silence that screamed louder than any accusation. I stood there, the polished wood of the witness stand cold beneath my trembling hands, staring out at faces that were once my world, now twisted into masks of disbelief and condemnation. My own blood, my family, and the words hung between us, heavy and poisonous. Thief, liar, betrayer. It felt like drowning, a slow, agonizing descent into a nightmare I couldn't wake from, orchestrated by the very people who were supposed to be my safe harbor. How did it come to this? How did love curdle into such bitter hate, leaving me isolated, fighting for my name, my freedom, my very sense of self, in the sterile, unforgiving glare of a courtroom? The truth seemed fragile, a tiny bird caught in a hurricane, and the only person who seemed to offer even a flicker of hope was someone I barely knew, a complete stranger watching silently from the back row. If you find yourself drawn into the depths of human drama, the shocking twists of fate, and the fight for justice against overwhelming odds, make sure you subscribe to this channel. We bring you stories that grip your heart and challenge your perceptions. Stories just like this one. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss what happens next. Now, let's go back to where it all began. Before the whispers turned to shouts. Before suspicion hardened into certainty in the eyes of my brother and sister. Before the word courtroom was anything more than a setting on a television show. My life until that point had been ordinary. Beautifully, reassuringly ordinary. My name is Eleanor Vance. I worked as a freelance graphic designer, pouring my creativity into logos and layouts from the cozy chaos of my small apartment in Brighton. It wasn't glamorous, not by a long shot. The hours were long, the clients often demanding, and the pay sometimes felt like a trickle rather than a flow. But it was mine. Every pixel perfected, every deadline met was a small victory I earned myself. My apartment overlooked a quiet street, seagulls occasionally crying overhead, a reminder of the sea just a few blocks away. Sunlight, when the British weather permitted it, would slant across my worn wooden desk, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, forgotten dreams. I loved the smell of brewing coffee in the morning, the comforting weight of my favorite oversized cardigan, the low hum of my computer, the soundtrack to my independence. My parents passed away a few years ago, leaving a void that still ached, especially during holidays or family milestones. It was just me, my older brother, Marcus, and my younger sister, Chloe. We were complicated. Like most families, I suppose. Marcus was the responsible one, a successful investment banker in the city, always impeccably dressed, with an air of slight impatience, as if the world wasn't quite keeping up with his schedule. He'd always seen my freelance career as somewhat unstable, a phase I ought to grow out of. "When are you going to get a proper job, Eleanor?" was a familiar refrain, usually delivered with a sigh that suggested deep disappointment disguised as concern. We weren't close, not really. There was a distance, forged partly by his ambition and partly by my quiet defiance of his expectations. He lived in a sprawling house in Surrey with his wife, Claire, who always seemed to observe me with a polite, yet assessing gaze. Chloe was different. Younger, brighter, more volatile. She worked in fashion PR in London, a world as dazzling and fast-paced as Marcus's was calculated and gray. Chloe and I had been closer growing up, sharing secrets and dreams whispered under duvet covers. But adulthood had pulled us onto different tracks. Her life was a whirlwind of launches, parties, and designer labels, while mine was, well, mine. Quiet, focused, small, perhaps, in her eyes. Lately, a strain had crept into our relationship too. A subtle competitiveness I hadn't noticed before. Sharp little comments about my flat, my clothes, my lack of a significant other. It stung, more than Marcus's bluntness ever could, because it came from the sister I thought understood me. She was struggling financially, I knew, despite the glamorous facade. Always chasing the next big thing, borrowing a little here, a little there, often from me, promising to pay it back when her big break came. The core of the impending storm, though I didn't know it yet, centered around our grandmother's legacy. Not a vast fortune, not sprawling estates, but something more intimate, more emotionally charged. her jewelry. Specifically, a vintage necklace. It wasn't ostentatious, not dripping with diamonds. But it was unique, a delicate filigree of antique gold, possibly Edwardian, with a single, deep blue sapphire teardrop suspended in the center. It was Grandma Evelyn's sapphire. It held memories Grandma Evelyn wearing it at weddings, her hand instinctively going to it when she told stories, the cool touch of the gold when she'd let me, as a child, trace its intricate patterns. Grandma Evelyn had passed away 6 months prior. Her will was simple. Her modest savings were divided equally amongst the three of us. Her personal belongings, including the jewelry, were left vaguely to be shared as mutually agreed upon by Eleanor, Marcus, and Chloe. A recipe for disaster in hindsight. We met at Marcus's house about a month after the funeral to sort through Grandma's things, which had been moved there temporarily. The atmosphere was subdued, thick with unspoken grief and the awkwardness of dividing a life into boxes. Most of it was straightforward photo albums, knitted shawls, silver frames. Then we came to the small, velvet-lined jewelry box. Inside lay Grandma Evelyn's life in ornaments. Simple gold bangles, pearl earrings, and nestled in the center, the sapphire necklace. It seemed to absorb the light in the room, the sapphire glinting with a depth that felt ancient. "It's stunning," Chloe breathed, reaching out a hand, her fingers hovering over the sapphire. "I remember Grandma wearing this to my university graduation ball. She wore it to our wedding," Claire, Marcus's wife, added quietly, standing beside him. There was an acquisitive gleam in her eye that I hadn't seen before. "It should probably be valued," Marcus said practically, adjusting his tie. "For insurance purposes, if nothing else. Then we can decide." "Decide what?" Chloe asked, her voice sharpening slightly. "Grandma always told me. She hinted that she wanted me to have it one day, for special occasions." I stayed silent. Grandma Evelyn had hinted things to me too, about how the necklace seemed to suit my quieter nature, how she hoped it would be cherished. But saying that now felt like throwing fuel on a fire I desperately wanted to avoid. I remembered Grandma letting me wear it once, for a cousin's wedding. I was 16, all awkward angles and shy smiles, but wearing the necklace made me feel graceful, connected to a lineage of strong women. Grandma had smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. "It looks right on you, dear," she'd whispered. "She never explicitly said that, Chloe," Marcus countered, his voice firm. "And frankly, given its potential value and your current situation, maybe it's best if it stays secure. Perhaps in a bank vault." Chloe flushed crimson. "What's that supposed to mean? That I can't be trusted with it? That I'd sell it?" "I'm just being realistic," Marcus said coolly. Claire placed a calming hand on his arm. "Maybe we should just take turns?" I suggested hesitantly, wanting only to diffuse the tension. "Wear it for special family events?" Neither of them seemed keen on that idea. Chloe looked mutinous, Marcus dismissive. Claire suggested they keep it safe at their place for the time being, given they had a better safe than Chloe or I did. Reluctantly, we agreed. It felt like a temporary truce, but the air remained heavy with unspoken resentment. The necklace, meant to be a symbol of heritage and love, had become a point of contention, a glittering catalyst for the cracks already present in our family structure. Over the next few weeks, things were superficially normal. We texted occasionally, brief, polite exchanges. Chloe asked for another small loan. I sent it, trying to ignore the familiar pang of unease. Marcus called once to ask if I'd landed any major clients yet. But beneath the surface, something was festering. I could feel it in the slight coolness in Chloe's tone, the way Marcus seemed even more distant. Then came the phone call that shattered my ordinary world into a million irreparable pieces. It was Marcus. His voice wasn't just cold. It was glacial. "Eleanor," he said, dispensing with any pleasantries. "We need to talk. Claire went to get the necklace from the safe this morning. For the Vance Family Foundation Gala tonight. She wanted to wear it." A pause stretched, heavy with menace. My stomach tightened into a painful knot. "And," I prompted, my voice barely a whisper. "And, Marcus's voice dropped, low and accusatory. It's gone. Gone. The word echoed in the sudden, terrifying silence. Gone where? How? My mind raced, scrambling for explanations, but Marcus didn't give me time. The last person known to have access to the study where the safe is, other than Claire and me, was you, Eleanor, he stated, each word a hammer blow. You came over last week to drop off those design proofs for Claire's charity committee. Remember? You were alone in the study for a few minutes while Claire went to get you a coffee. My blood ran cold. I had been there. I remembered standing awkwardly in their large, expensively furnished study, waiting. The huge oak desk, the leather armchairs, the abstract art on the walls. But the safe? I hadn't gone near it. I vaguely recalled Claire mentioning it was concealed behind a landscape painting, but I hadn't paid much attention. Marcus? No, I stammered, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I wouldn't. Why would I? Why? His laugh was short, sharp, and utterly devoid of warmth. Money, Eleanor. You're always scraping by. Chloe mentioned you've been complaining about bills again. That necklace is vintage, potentially worth thousands. Enough to solve your little problems. Wouldn't you say? The accusation, so swift, so certain, stole my breath. It wasn't just about a missing necklace anymore. It was about my character, my integrity, my entire life, being reframed through the lens of their suspicion. It was my brother painting me as desperate, capable of betraying our grandmother's memory, betraying them for money. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an attack. And it was coming from inside my own family. The nightmare had begun. I stood frozen in my small Brighton apartment, the phone still pressed hard against my ear. Marcus's cruel words echoing in the sudden silence. Enough to solve your little problems, wouldn't you say? Little problems. Was that how he saw my life? My dedication, my struggles, just little problems easily solved by grand theft? The injustice of it burned, hot and acidic, in my chest. Marcus, listen to me. I pleaded, my voice shaking despite my effort to keep it steady. Think about this. It doesn't make sense. I loved Grandma Evelyn. I loved that necklace because she loved it. Why would I steal something that meant so much? And how could you even think I'm capable of that? Oh, spare me the sentimental act, Eleanor. He snapped back, his voice laced with impatience. People do desperate things when they're cornered financially. We know you needed money. Chloe told us how you were barely making rent last month. Chloe, my own sister. Had she really been feeding them snippets of my struggles, painting a picture of desperation? The thought was a fresh wave of nausea. Was her earlier competitiveness, those sharp little comments, rooted in something uglier? Had she perhaps wanted the necklace so badly herself that framing me seemed like a twisted solution? My mind recoiled from the thought, but the seed was planted. Chloe borrowing money from me doesn't mean I'd steal from our family, I argued, my voice rising. I was not alone in the study the entire time. Claire was in and out, wasn't she? And what about cleaners, gardeners, anyone else who has access to your house? Don't try to deflect, Marcus cut in sharply. Our cleaner hasn't been for 2 weeks, the gardener doesn't come inside, and Claire was only gone for 2 minutes, maybe 3, to make you a coffee in the kitchen adjacent to the study. You had the opportunity, Eleanor. More than anyone else who isn't family. His certainty was chilling. It was as if he'd already held a trial in his head and delivered the verdict. This is insane, I whispered, sinking onto the edge of my worn armchair. The familiar comfort of my home suddenly felt alien, unsafe. You can't seriously believe this. Believe it? We're living it, he retorted. Claire is distraught. That necklace wasn't just Grandma's. It's a family heirloom. Its value is significant, well over 5 figures according to a preliminary estimate we got. He paused, letting the implied threat hang in the air. We've already filed a report with the police, Eleanor. We had to, for the insurance, if nothing else. They'll want to speak with you. The police. Insurance. It wasn't just a family argument anymore. It was official, clinical, criminal. My breath hitched. Images flooded my mind. Police officers at my door, questioning me, searching my small apartment, my neighbors watching, whispering. My freelance clients finding out, my reputation evaporating. My world wasn't just tilting now. It was crumbling. You filed a police report? Without even talking to me properly. Without even considering. I couldn't finish the sentence. The betrayal felt absolute. We considered the facts, Eleanor, Marcus said, his voice devoid of any emotion. The necklace is gone. You were the last one with unsupervised access near the safe. You have a perceived motive. The facts aren't in your favor. The police will be in touch. I suggest you think very carefully about what you tell them. It might be easier if you just cooperate. Tell us where it is. He was asking for a confession. He genuinely believed I had it. There was no reasoning with him, no appeal to shared history or familial love that could penetrate his conviction. I don't have it, Marcus, I said, my voice flat, drained of energy. I didn't take it. We'll see, he replied coldly, and the line went dead. I sat there for a long time, the dial tone buzzing in my ear like an angry insect. The sun slanted through the window, illuminating the familiar dust motes, but they no longer looked like dreams. They looked like ashes. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and fear. I barely slept, jumping at every noise, my stomach twisting every time the phone rang. Would it be the police? Would it be Chloe, calling to feign sympathy or perhaps twist the knife further? I tried calling her, needing to hear her voice, to ask her directly what she told Marcus, but my calls went straight to voicemail. She didn't reply to my texts either. It was a silence more damning than any accusation. The police did contact me. 2 detectives, a man and a woman, formal but not unkind, visited my apartment. They asked questions about my finances, my relationship with my family, my movements on the day I visited Marcus and Claire. I answered honestly, my voice trembling, acutely aware of how flimsy my defense sounded. Yes, I needed money sometimes. Yes, I was alone in the study for a few minutes. No, I didn't see the necklace. No, I had no idea where it was. They searched my apartment, a polite but thorough invasion that left me feeling violated and exposed. They found nothing, of course, but their parting words offered little comfort. We'll be in touch if we have further questions, Ms. Vance. The news inevitably began to leak. Not in headlines, but in the insidious way these things do within families and social circles. Whispers at the edges of conversations, pitying glances from distant relatives, awkward silences when I entered a room, or, more often, wasn't invited at all. The Vance Family Foundation Gala, the event Claire had wanted the necklace for, went ahead. I saw pictures online, Marcus looking stern, Claire smiling tightly, Chloe dazzling in a new dress, looking slightly strained but undeniably part of the inner circle. I was conspicuously absent. The invisible stain of suspicion had already marked me. I tried to work, needing the distraction as much as the income, but concentration was impossible. My creativity felt smothered under a blanket of dread. Deadlines slipped. Clients, sensing my distraction or perhaps hearing the rumors, became distant. One long-term client politely terminated our contract, citing budget cuts. Felt like another door slamming shut. The isolation was crushing. My few close friends were supportive, expressing shock and disbelief at the accusation, but they couldn't truly understand the depth of the family betrayal. How could they? It was unthinkable. I found myself withdrawing even from them, ashamed and exhausted by the constant need to explain, to defend, to assert my innocence against the weight of my own family's condemnation. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, seeking refuge in anonymity, I was sitting in a small cafe near the lanes, nursing a cup of tea I couldn't taste, staring blankly out at the wet pavement. My mind was racing, replaying Marcus's words, Chloe's silence, the detective's polite but probing questions. Was there anything I missed? Any detail that could help? Who else knew about the necklace? Who else might have wanted it? Claire? She seemed so polished, but that gleam in her eye. And Chloe? Desperate for cash and status, feeling overlooked. The thoughts circled endlessly, offering no answers, only more pain. As I pushed my cup away, preparing to leave, I noticed him. A man sitting alone a few tables away. He wasn't looking directly at me, but I had the distinct feeling I'd seen him before. Perhaps in the background somewhere. He was older, maybe late 50s, dressed inconspicuously in a tweed jacket, nursing a pint. He seemed observant. Not in a threatening way, more like a quiet watcher. He caught my eye briefly, a flicker of something unreadable in his expression. Recognition? Sympathy? Before looking away, back into his newspaper. It was probably nothing, just my frayed nerves making me paranoid. But the fleeting moment stuck with me. A stranger, seemingly noticing my distress in a way my own family refused to. A few days later, the other shoe dropped. Marcus called again. This time, his voice held a grim satisfaction. Eleanor, the police haven't found sufficient evidence to proceed with criminal charges against you yet. But don't think this is over. My heart leaped. A brief, desperate flicker of hope. Maybe they believed me? However, he continued, dashing that hope instantly. Claire and I, as executors of Grandma's implied wishes regarding the heirloom, cannot let this stand. We've spoken to our solicitor. We're initiating civil proceedings against you. We intend to recover the value of the necklace. We're taking you to court. Civil proceedings. Court. It wasn't just whispers and suspicion anymore. It was legal documents, judges, witnesses. My own brother and his wife formally, publicly, legally branding me a thief. The room spun. The stranger in the cafe flashed briefly in my mind. A meaningless detail, yet strangely persistent. This was it. The family drama was officially becoming a court drama. And I was utterly, terrifyingly alone. Or so I thought. Civil proceedings. Court. The words echoed Marcus's cold finality, settling like ice shards in my stomach. It wasn't enough that they had suspected me, accused me, reported me to the police. Now they were dragging me through a formal legal battle, turning family grief and inheritance into a public spectacle with me cast as the villain. The sheer, calculated cruelty of it was breathtaking. This wasn't about finding the truth anymore, if it ever was. This was about punishment, about making me pay, literally, for a crime I didn't commit, fueled by their certainty and, perhaps, Claire's desire for the necklace and Marcus's need to control the narrative, the outcome, everything. The official-looking envelope arrived a week later. Thick, cream-colored paper, bearing the insignia of a high-end London law firm. My hands trembled so badly I could barely tear it open. Inside, dense paragraphs of legal jargon detailed the claim against me. Eleanor Vance, defendant, accused of unlawfully converting property belonging to the estate of the late Evelyn Vance, namely, one antique sapphire and gold necklace, for her own use. They were claiming damages equivalent to the estimated value Marcus had mentioned, plus legal costs. It was a staggering sum, more money than I'd ever seen, let alone possessed. Reading it felt like being physically struck. They weren't just accusing me of theft. They were potentially bankrupting me, destroying my future. Panic set in, cold and sharp. I needed a solicitor. Immediately. But where to even begin? My freelance income, already precarious, had dwindled alarmingly since the accusations started. The kind of high-powered lawyers Marcus and Claire could afford were completely out of my league. I spent hours online, scrolling through lists of local solicitors, my heart sinking with every hourly rate I saw quoted. Legal aid? I quickly discovered that for civil cases like this, especially involving family disputes over assets, eligibility was incredibly difficult to meet unless you were truly destitute, and even then it wasn't guaranteed. I made tentative calls, explaining my situation in a low, mortified voice. Most receptionists were polite but firm. Their fees were fixed, retainers were required up front, and a case against a wealthy, determined claimant like my brother would be expensive and time-consuming. One solicitor offered a brief, discounted initial consultation. He listened patiently, reviewed the claim document, his expression growing increasingly grave. "This is aggressive," he said finally, tapping the paper. Your brother and his wife clearly have significant resources and they intend to use them. Their solicitors are a top-tier firm. To fight this properly, Ms. Vance will require substantial investigation, gathering evidence, witness preparation. It's going to be costly. He quoted a figure for the initial retainer that made my head spin. It was more than I earned in 6 months. Frankly, he added, his voice softening slightly with pity, without concrete evidence to refute their claim, proof of where you were, an alibi that covers the entire time frame, or ideally, evidence pointing to someone else, defending this will be an uphill battle, especially given your familial relationship and the perceived financial motive they're highlighting. I left his office feeling more hopeless than ever. An uphill battle, without concrete evidence. How could I prove a negative? How could I prove I didn't do something, especially when I was technically there, near the scene of the alleged crime, albeit innocently? The burden of proof might legally be on them, the claimants, but the reality felt different. My own family's accusation carried immense weight. It felt like I was presumed guilty until proven innocent, and proving my innocence seemed impossible. The weeks that followed crawled by in a haze of anxiety. I tried to find cheaper legal counsel, exploring pro bono options, law clinics run by students, anything. But the complexity of the case, involving disputed inheritance and significant value, made it difficult to find adequate help quickly. I managed to scrape together enough money for a more affordable solicitor to handle the initial response, a formal denial of the claim, but we both knew it was just stalling for time. He advised me to gather any evidence I could, bank statements showing my financial situation wasn't as desperate as they claimed, though admitting I'd lent Chloe money didn't help. Testimonials from friends about my character, though how much weight would that carry? Anything that might cast doubt on their narrative. It all felt so flimsy, like building a sandcastle against a rising tide. My isolation deepened. Christmas was approaching, a time that had always been bittersweet since our parents died, but now filled me with a unique dread. There were no invitations from Marcus and Claire, of course. Even extended family seemed to keep their distance, caught awkwardly in the crossfire. I received a short, stilted Christmas card from Chloe, wishing me all the best for the festive season, with no mention of the gaping chasm between us. No word of support, no apology. It felt like a deliberate act of cowardice, hiding behind platitudes while my life unraveled. I spent Christmas Day alone in my apartment, watching old movies, the silence punctuated only by the distant sound of carol singers, amplifying my solitude. Work had all but dried up. The stress made it impossible to be creative, and the few potential leads I chased seemed to evaporate once they did a cursory search and likely encountered the whispers. Or perhaps Marcus and Claire had been more active in poisoning the well than I realized. I started looking for part-time jobs. Anything to keep afloat, to pay the solicitor, to simply survive. Waiting tables, shop assistant work. It was a humbling, terrifying prospect. It was during one of these bleak job-hunting afternoons, walking home in the biting January wind after dropping off yet another CV, that I saw him again. The man from the cafe. He was standing near the entrance to my apartment building, looking up at the windows, not mine specifically, just observing. He wasn't doing anything threatening, just standing there, hands in the pockets of the same tweed jacket, a thoughtful expression on his face. This time our eyes met directly. He held my gaze for a second longer than a stranger normally would. There was still nothing overtly readable in his expression. No overt friendliness, but no hostility either. Just awareness. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, then turned and walked away down the street at a measured pace. My heart hammered against my ribs. Coincidence? Felt like too much of one. Why was he here? Did Marcus hire him to watch me? Was he a private investigator? The thought sent a fresh wave of panic through me. Or was it something else? That flicker I'd seen in the cafe, the nod just now. Could it be sympathy? Could he somehow know something? It was a wild, desperate thought, born of having absolutely no one else to turn to. But who was he? And why would he care? I watched him disappear around the corner, my mind racing faster than ever. The initial court date was set for early March. A preliminary hearing, my solicitor explained, to establish the timeline, review initial evidence, and potentially encourage settlement. Settlement. The word tasted like ash. It meant admitting some form of liability, paying them something just to make it stop. My solicitor gently suggested it might be the most pragmatic option, given the costs and uncertainty of a full trial. Sometimes, he'd said kindly, winning isn't about proving your innocence, it's about minimizing the damage. But how could I settle? How could I agree to pay for something I didn't do? It felt like letting them win, validating their poisonous accusations. It meant living forever under that cloud of guilt, even if it was a manufactured one. Every fiber of my being screamed against it. Yet, the alternative, a full trial, public testimony, cross-examination, the potential for a devastating judgment against me, was terrifying. I felt trapped, squeezed between financial ruin and the destruction of my name. Sleep offered no escape. My dreams filled with gavels banging, accusing fingers pointing, and the cold, unforgiving eyes of my brother. I replayed the day I visited Marcus and Claire's house endlessly. The study, the awkward wait, Claire bringing the coffee. Was there anything at all, I had missed? Any small detail? Who else could have taken it? Chloe seemed the most likely, driven by debt and jealousy, but proving it felt impossible. Maybe Claire herself had orchestrated it? To secure the necklace definitively? It seemed Machiavellian, but the way she'd looked at it, or maybe it was just a simple, random theft they were pinning on me? A burglar? But Marcus had dismissed that. The pressure was immense. The court date loomed, a dark monolith on the horizon. My solicitor needed my decision. Attempt settlement or prepare for battle. I felt myself crumbling under the weight of it all. The loneliness, the fear, the sheer injustice. I needed proof. I needed a miracle. I needed someone, anyone, to believe me, to help me fight back. My mind flashed again to the stranger, the man in the tweed jacket, his observant eyes, his silent nod. A ridiculous, desperate hope. But right then, ridiculous hope was all I had left. The final days leading up to the preliminary hearing were the longest of my life. Each hour stretched into an eternity of frayed nerves and gnawing uncertainty. The choice loomed. Settle and accept a lifetime tainted by suspicion, or fight and risk absolute ruin. My solicitor called, needing my final decision. His tone was gentle but pragmatic. Eleanor, I need to be frank. Their case, while circumstantial, plays on perception. A struggling freelancer, a valuable heirloom, opportunity, juries, even judges, can be swayed by narrative. Settling might allow you to retain some control, to walk away without a formal judgment of liability, even if it feels unjust. I stared out of my window at the gray brightened sky. Walking away felt like surrendering my identity. If I settled, wouldn't that be seen as an admission of guilt anyway? Wouldn't Marcus and Claire ensure everyone knew I'd paid up? No, couldn't. The fight might destroy me, but surrender felt like a different kind of death. No, I said, my voice surprisingly firm, cutting through my own fear. I won't settle. I didn't do this. We fight. My solicitor sighed softly. All right, Eleanor. I admire your resolve. But be prepared. It will be grueling. They will try to paint you in the worst possible light. Your finances, your personal life, anything they can use. The morning of the hearing dawned cold and damp. I dressed carefully, choosing sober, professional clothes, trying to project an image of composure I didn't feel. My hands were shaking as I did up the buttons on my blouse. Looking in the mirror, I saw a pale, strained version of myself, dark circles under my eyes betraying sleepless nights. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed my bag and headed out, feeling like a soldier marching towards an unavoidable battle. The courthouse was an imposing Victorian building, all stone pillars and echoing corridors. It smelled faintly of dust and old paper. My solicitor, Mr. Davies, met me near the entrance, offering a brief, encouraging smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He led me towards the designated courtroom, a relatively small, modern room compared to the building's exterior, dominated by the judge's bench at the front. And then I saw them. Marcus, Claire, and Chloe, huddled with two sharp-suited lawyers near the claimant's table. Marcus looked severe, his jaw set. Claire stood beside him, radiating icy confidence, clutching a designer handbag like a shield. She glanced towards me, her eyes cold and dismissive, before turning back to her lawyer. Chloe stood slightly apart, avoiding my gaze, fidgeting with the strap of her own bag. She looked pale and genuinely distressed, a stark contrast to Claire's composure. Was it guilt, or just the stress of the situation? Couldn't tell. The sight of them together, united against me, sent a fresh wave of desolation washing over me. We took our places at the defendant's table. The room gradually filled with clerks, court staff, and a few observers I didn't recognize. My heart pounded against my ribs. Mr. Davies leaned over. Remember, Eleanor, this is preliminary, mostly procedural, but their solicitor will likely make an opening statement summarizing their claim. Stay calm. Don't react, no matter what they say. The judge entered, a stern-looking woman with sharp eyes, and the room fell silent. The clerk announced the case. Vance and Vance versus Vance. Sounded absurd. Family name weaponized. After some initial procedural matters, the judge nodded to Marcus and Claire's lead solicitor. He rose smoothly, a man radiating expensive confidence. Your Honor, he began, his voice resonating clearly in the quiet room. This is a regrettable but necessary action concerning the misappropriation of a significant family heirloom, valued conservatively at £75,000. He gestured towards Marcus and Claire. My clients, Mr. Marcus Vance and Mrs. Claire Vance, acting with heavy hearts, bring this claim against the defendant, Ms. Eleanor Vance. He proceeded to lay out their narrative. The precious necklace, entrusted to Marcus and Claire for safekeeping. Eleanor's visit, her brief, unsupervised period alone in the study containing the safe. The subsequent discovery of the theft. Eleanor's alleged financial difficulties providing a clear motive. He spoke of opportunity, motive, and the defendant's inability to provide a satisfactory explanation. Each word was carefully chosen, painting a picture of a desperate woman betraying her family's trust. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles white, fighting the urge to scream, "It's not true!" I could feel the judge's eyes on me, assessing my reaction. I forced myself to remain still, staring straight ahead, my face a mask of strained neutrality. Claire dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, a perfectly timed display of sorrow. Marcus looked stoic, the picture of a wronged brother. Mr. Davies rose to make our brief, formal rebuttal, denying the allegations and stating our intent to vigorously defend the claim. It felt weak, inadequate against the confident onslaught we had just witnessed. The judge made notes, her expression unreadable. She spoke about scheduling, disclosure of evidence, the possibility of mediation. It felt like the wheels of an unstoppable machine were grinding forward, pulling me towards inevitable disaster. Despair washed over me. This was it. They were going to win. They would destroy me, and no one would ever know the truth. It was then, during a brief pause as the judge consulted her notes, that a small commotion occurred near the courtroom entrance. A court usher approached the bench and spoke quietly to the judge. The judge looked up, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. She looked towards the back of the courtroom, and there he was, the man from the cafe, the man outside my apartment, Mr. Tweed Jacket. He stood near the doorway, looking calm and resolute. He wasn't dressed for court, still in his usual attire, but he held himself with a quiet dignity. The judge cleared her throat. It appears, she said, looking first at the claimant's side, then at ours, that we have an individual, a Mr. Arthur Harrison, who wishes to present information he believes is directly relevant to this case. He was apparently unaware of today's hearing until this morning, but feels his information is pertinent. Marcus and Claire exchanged baffled, annoyed glances. Their solicitor looked momentarily wrong-footed. Who was Arthur Harrison? My mind raced. The stranger had a name, and he wanted to speak. Mr. Davies looked over at me, eyebrows raised in a silent question. I could only shrug, my heart suddenly doing a frantic, hopeful leap against my ribs. Mr. Harrison, the judge called out, her voice neutral but firm. You understand this is highly irregular. We are in a preliminary civil hearing. Are you a party to this case? A listed witness? No, Your Honor, Arthur Harrison replied, his voice steady and clear, carrying easily across the room. I am not, but I believe I possess information, photographic evidence in fact, that pertains directly to the alleged timeline of the necklace's disappearance. Evidence that might shed considerable light on the matter. Photographic evidence? My breath caught in my throat. Marcus stiffened. Claire's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. Chloe looked down at her hands, her face paler than ever. What had he seen? What had he captured? Could this quiet, observant stranger, this Mr. Harrison, really be the miracle I had so desperately prayed for? The judge peered down at him over her spectacles, considering. The air in the courtroom crackled, no longer with accusation, but with sudden, sharp, electrifying suspense. The courtroom held its breath. All eyes were on Arthur Harrison, this unexpected figure standing at the threshold of my salvation or final condemnation. The judge observed him for a long moment, her gaze sharp and assessing. Marcus's solicitor began to rise, likely to object, but the judge silenced him with a small gesture. Mr. Harrison, she said, her voice cutting through the silence. While this court operates under formal procedures, the primary objective is always justice and truth. If you possess evidence directly pertinent to the timeline and facts disputed in this claim, I will allow you to present it now. Briefly, please. And be aware you are making statements in a court of law. Arthur Harrison nodded respectfully. He stepped forward, holding a large envelope. Thank you, Your Honor. My name is Arthur Harrison. I live at number 14, Ashton Drive, 2 doors down from Mr. and Mrs. Vance. He indicated Marcus and Claire, who now looked thoroughly bewildered. I'm recently retired. I've taken up photography as a hobby. Architecture, street scenes, that sort of thing. Their house, he nodded towards them again, is quite distinctive. On the afternoon of Tuesday, October 17th, the day I visited, the day the necklace allegedly disappeared, I was experimenting with my new camera lens, taking shots up and down the street. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. October 17th. He was there. He saw something. I took several photos that afternoon, Mr. Harrison continued calmly, opening the envelope. Mostly wide shots of the street, but a few focused on the architectural details of number 18 Mr. and Mrs. Vance's home. The camera automatically records the date and time. He produced several glossy prints and handed them to the usher, who passed them up to the judge. If you look at the timestamps, Your Honor, the first relevant photo is timed at 3:42 p.m. The judge examined the photo. I craned my neck, desperate to see. This photo, Mr. Harrison explained, shows Ms. Eleanor Vance. He nodded towards me kindly, leaving number 18. As you can see, she is carrying only her handbag and a portfolio folder. Nothing else. A collective intake of breath. Mr. Davies put a steadying hand on my arm. It was proof. Proof I left empty-handed, just as I'd said. But was it enough? However, Mr. Harrison continued, and the room fell silent again. If you look at the next photograph, timed at 4:15 p.m., approximately 30 minutes after Ms. Eleanor Vance departed. He paused. The judge picked up the second photograph. Her eyes widened slightly. She looked from the photo towards the claimant's table, her gaze lingering pointedly on my sister, Chloe. At 4:15 p.m., Arthur Harrison stated clearly, my photograph shows Miss Chloe Vance arriving at the house. She appears agitated. She used a key to let herself in. He produced another photo. And this one, Your Honor, timed at 4:38 p.m., shows Miss Chloe Vance leaving the house. She is carrying her usual handbag, but she also appears to be concealing something bulky inside her coat pocket, and she kept looking nervously back towards the house as she hurried away. Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. Then, a choked sob came from Chloe. Her face, already pale, had crumpled completely. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She wouldn't look at Marcus or Claire, staring instead at her trembling hands twisting in her lap. "Chloe," Marcus whispered, turning towards her, his face a mask of dawning horror and disbelief. Claire looked utterly stunned, her icy composure finally cracking, glancing from Chloe to the photos in the judge's hand as if she couldn't comprehend it. "Ms. Chloe Vance," the judge said sternly, her eyes fixed on my sister. "Do you have any response to Mr. Harrison's evidence?" Chloe couldn't speak. She just shook her head, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. But her silence was an admission, louder than any confession. The truth hit the room like a physical force. It wasn't me. It was Chloe. Driven by debt, perhaps jealousy, maybe a moment of desperate weakness, she had used her access, taken the necklace after I left, and let me take the fall. The calculated cruelty of Marcus and Claire's accusation was suddenly dwarfed by the quiet, devastating betrayal of my younger sister. Marcus looked poleaxed, staring at Chloe as if seeing her for the first time. Claire's expression shifted rapidly from shock to fury, her eyes blazing at her sister-in-law. Their expensive lawyers exchanged urgent whispers, their confident facade collapsing. Mr. Davies leaned towards me, his voice low but filled with relief. "Eleanor, this changes everything." The judge surveyed the scene, Chloe's breakdown, Marcus and Claire's shock, my own stunned silence. "In light of this extraordinary and compelling new evidence," she declared, her voice ringing with authority, "this court finds it impossible to proceed with the claim against Ms. Eleanor Vance at this time. Indeed, the foundation of the claim appears to be entirely undermined." She looked directly at Marcus and Claire's lead solicitor. "I strongly suggest you reconsider your position. This hearing is adjourned indefinitely pending further investigation, likely by other authorities." She banged her gavel, a sound of finality that, this time, felt like liberation. It was over. Just like that, the weight that had been crushing me for months suddenly lifted. Tears welled in my eyes, not tears of sorrow or fear, but of overwhelming, bone-deep relief. I looked towards Arthur Harrison, who caught my eye from the back of the room. He gave me another small, almost imperceptible nod, a faint, kind smile touching his lips, before quietly slipping out of the courtroom. My savior, a stranger who simply paid attention, who captured a moment in time, and who had the courage to come forward. Marcus and Claire were frozen, staring at the wreck of their certainty. Chloe was being hesitantly comforted by their junior solicitor, still weeping. The family bond, already strained, now lay shattered on the courtroom floor. There was no triumph in seeing them brought low, only a profound sadness for what we had lost, what we had done to each other. But beneath the sadness, a stronger feeling surged of vindication. My name was clear. The truth, fragile as it seemed, had found a way to emerge into the light. Mr. Davies was shaking my hand, relief evident on his face. "We did it, Eleanor. Or rather, Mr. Harrison did." I nodded, still processing the rapid turn of events. I stepped out of the courthouse into the pale, brightened sunlight. The air felt fresh, clean. The weight was gone. I had my life back. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, rebuilding trust, finding work, healing from the betrayal, but for the first time in months, I could breathe. I looked down the street, half hoping to see Mr. Harrison, to thank him properly. But he was gone. A quiet observer who stepped out of the shadows just long enough to change a life, then faded back in. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and started walking towards the sea, towards my future, finally free. The END.